Good morning, students. Welcome to the academic year 2021. Today, we are going to learn about control and coordination in the 10th standard biology part. So, before going to the chapter control and coordination, let's come. We'll see that what are the things we are going to learn. Content: what is a control and coordination? Animal nervous system, sensory receptor, structure of neuron, passage of impulses, reflex action, human brain, plant movements, plant hormones, animal hormones, and endocrine system. See, when we are learning about the control and coordination, just have a previous knowledge. See, according to our previous chapter in a life process, we had started with the notation that we all have, we see something moving, it is alive. Some of these movements are in fact the result of growth, as in plants. A seed germinates and grows, and we can say that the seedling moves over the course of few days. It pushes soil aside and comes out. But if it is a growth, where to be stopped? These movements would not happen. Some movements, as in many animals and some plants, are not connected with the growth. A cat running, children playing on swing, buffalo chewing cud, these are not movements caused by growth. Why do we associate such visible movements with life? A possible answer is that we think of movement as a response to change in the environment of the organism. The cat may be running because it has seen a mouse. Not only that, we also think of a movement as an attempt by living organisms to use changes in their environment to their advantage. Plants grow out into the sunshine. Children try to get pleasure and fun out of singing. Buffalo chew cud to help break up tough food so as to able to digest it better. When bright light is focused on our eyes or when we touch a hot object, we detect the change and respond to it with movement in order to protect ourselves. If we think a bit more about this, it becomes apparent that all these movements in response to the environment is carefully controlled. Each kind of the change in the environment evokes an appropriate movement in response. When we want to talk to our friends in a class, we whisper rather than shouting loudly. Clearly, the movement to be made depends on the event that is triggering. It is therefore such control movement must be connected to the recognition of various events in the environment, followed by only the correct movement in response. In other words, living organism must use systems providing control and coordination. In keeping with general principles of the body organization in multicellular organism, specialized tissues are used to provide these control and coordination activities. So, what is in a control and coordination? Working together of a various integrated body system in response to change in the surrounding for the maintenance of bodily function is known as control and coordination. So, in this, we are going to learn first the stimuli. The changes in the environment to which living organisms respond are called stimuli. Like, for example, heat, cold, sound, smell, taste, touch, pressure, gravity, water, etc. Living organisms respond to stimuli in the form of body movements. May I give another example? If we touch an earthworm, it moves away from the place. If we place a plant in the shade, they grow towards the source of light. Or another example, a person runs away from the snake the moment he sees it. In this example, snake is a stimulus and running away from it is a response. Coordination. For a proper response to a stimulus, many organs in the body should work together. The working together of various organs in an organism to produce a proper response to stimulus is called coordination. See, this kind of response indicates that living organisms have mechanism to identify or sense the stimulus in the environment. This information is sent to the organ which has the ability to respond to such changes. In multicellular organism, coordination between various organ systems is brought about in two general ways, namely controlled by nervous system and the endocrine system. Whereas in a plant, it is controlled and done by the chemical substances called plant hormones or the phytohormones. Coordination in animals takes place with the help of the nervous system and endocrine system, including that the sense organs are also there. The nervous system mainly consists of brain, spinal cord and the nerves, in which we are going to learn about the nervous system, which consists of receptors, effectors and conductors. These are the three others. Let's first come to the receptor. Receptors are the sense organ which receive the stimuli and pass the message to the brain or a spinal cord through the sensory nerves. And in this we can give certain examples like photoreceptors are there in the eyes to detect the light. Phonoreceptors are there in the ears to detect the sound. Olfactory receptors are there in the nose to detect smell. Gustatory receptors are there in the tongue to detect taste. And tango receptors are there in the skin to detect the touch. Now the effectors. Effectors are the muscles and the glands which respond to the information from brain and the spinal cord through the motor nerve. In which we further include as a sensory nerves are the nerves which carry information from the receptors like sense organ to the brain and a spinal cord. And one more, the motor nerves which carry information from the brain and a spinal cord to the effectors like muscles and the glands. And the lastly, the conductors. The conductors, the tissue which connects the receptors and the effectors and help in conducting the stimulus are called conductors. Let's move on to the components of the nervous system. See, when we are talking about the nervous system, man stands unique and supreme in the living world. This supremacy is due to a highly well-developed brain. The nervous system of all vertebrates, including man, is made up of nerve cell called neuron and supporting cells. See, when we are talking about the parts of the nervous system has three basic components, namely central nervous system, peripheral nervous system and autonomic nervous system. Human nervous system consists of central nervous system which contains brain and spinal cord, peripheral nervous system which contains cranial nerves and the spinal nerves, autonomic nervous system which contains sympathetic and parasympathetic. So in this picture we can observe the central nervous system which is consist of brain and the spinal cord. Not only that, in another picture we can identify the peripheral nervous system in which we are having cranial nerves and the spinal nerves. There are 12 pairs of cranial nerves are there and 31 pairs of spinal nerves are there. And lastly, the autonomic nervous system in which we include sympathetic nerves and parasympathetic nerves. And in this, we can include that voluntary and involuntary activities are there. Now, let's come to the what we call the nerve cell or the neuron. See, when we are talking about the nerve cell or the neuron, neuron is the structural and functional unit of nervous system. It has a cell body called cyton containing a nucleus and a cytoplasm. It has several branched structure called dendrites. It has a long nerve fiber called axon, which is covered by a protective covering called myelin sheath. The junction between two neurons is called synapses. Message passes through the nerve cell in the form of chemical and electrical signals is called nerve impulses. The dendrite receives the information and starts a chemical reaction which produces electrical impulses which passes through the axon. See, we can see the structure of the neuron where we can say that the structural and functional unit of a nervous tissue is a nerve cell or a neuron. The part consisting of a prominent nucleus is the cell body. The short brush-like structure arising from the cell body are called dendrites. The long extension of the cell body is the axon. The axon ends in a bunch of branches. The axon is covered by a fatty sheath called myelin sheath. Dendrites carries the impulses towards the cell body. Axon carry the message away from the cell body. There is a tiny gap between a successive neuron. This gap is known as synapses. The impulses are transmitted from the axon of one neuron to the dendrite of another neuron across the synapses through chemical substances. A number of neurons held together by a sheath form a thread-like structure called nerve fibers. Several neurons together form knot-like structure called ganglia. So in this picture we can see that one neuron's nerve ending is connected to the another neuron of its dendrites, where the transmission of the message will take place from the chemicals to the electrical impulses. Now let's come to the what we call the nervous system, in which central nervous system where we are going to learn about the brain and spinal cord. So first let's come to the brain. The brain is the main coordinating center in the human body. It is protected by the cranium. It is covered by three membranes called meninges. And meninges filled with the fluid called cerebrospinal fluid, which protects the brain from the shocks. So when we are talking about the brain and the spinal cord, see the three membranes, namely the outer durameter, the middle arachnoid and inner pyometer are there. These membranes are called meninges. The space between the meninges is filled with the watery fluid called cerebrospinal fluid, which is protecting the spinal cord from injury and provide nutrients to the cell from brain to the spinal cord. The fluid flows from brain to the spinal cord and back to the brain. Brain is protected by a bony case called as a cranium. The brain is very well developed and has reached a complexity resulting in a high mental capacity. The brain of an adult man weighs about 1400 grams. When if we compare to a newborn child, it's a 350 grams. And when it compares to a 1-year-old child, it's a 1000 grams. And if we compare it to the adult woman, it is a 1260 grams. As we know that brain is divided into three major parts: the forebrain, the midbrain and the hindbrain. The hindbrain continues as a spinal cord. So the first we come across with what we call as a brain. When we are talking about the brain, it shows two major parts called cerebrum and the diencephalon. Cerebrum is in the largest part of the brain. It consists of two equal halves called cerebral hemisphere, right and left, separated by a groove. Cerebrum shows two regions, namely an outer cortex and inner medulla. Cortex is composed of cytons and forms the gray matter. The medulla is composed of nerve fiber, axon and dendrites, and form the white matter. The cortex is deeply folded into ridges called convolutions, which increase the surface area of the cerebrum. The high degree of intelligence of the human being is supposed to be the result of the great development of cortex. Cerebrum is the seat of consciousness. It is the center of mental activity. It receives messages from the five sense organs and enable us to observe our environment through them. The information gained through the sense organ is stored in the cerebral cells and is used when necessary. This is called memory power. The cerebrum is the seat of intelligence, imagination, reasoning, emotions, and willpower. Specific areas of the cerebrum are associated with a specific function. Thus, there are separate centers to hear, to see, to taste, and to speak. Damage to any particular center affects that particular function. The nerves coming from the left side of the body are connected to the right cerebral hemisphere. The nerves coming from the right side of the body cross over and enter in the left cerebral hemisphere. Hence, the right hemisphere controls the organ of the left side and the left hemisphere controls the organ of right side. Any injury to the left hemisphere result in a paralysis of the organ on the right side and a vice versa. As we know that the another part is called as a diencephalon. Parts of the brain below the cerebrum are together known as diencephalon. They can be divided into an upper thalamus and a lower hypothalamus. Thalamus receive nerve impulses from many sense organs and send them to the upper region. The hypothalamus regulate body temperature, water balance, appetite, and sleep. It also controls autonomic nervous system and pituitary gland. Now let's come to the midbrain. Midbrain is a small region of a brain made up of nerve fibers connecting cerebrum to the cerebellum. It serves mainly as a relay station through which impulses move from hindbrain to the forebrain. It is concerned with the receiving impulses from eyes and ears. Now lastly, the hindbrain. Hindbrain consists of three parts, namely pons varolii, cerebellum, and medulla oblongata. Pons is the conducting medium between cerebrum and the cerebellum and medulla oblongata. It has the controlling center of masticulation, facial expression, respiration, and forms of conducting pathway. There are 12 pairs of cranial nerves, of which 4 pairs originate from the pons. Cerebellum is a region which lies behind and below the cerebrum. It is responsible for maintenance of equilibrium and posture of the body. It coordinates and controls the movement of muscle in action like walking or running. Lastly, the medulla oblongata is the posterior most part of the brain and continues as a spinal cord. It has centers which control the involuntary activities of the body such as breathing, heartbeat, movements of digestive tract, swallowing, vomiting, etc. Enzyme secretion, blood pressure, and other activities. So, children, today we have learnt about the nervous system as well as the brain. So, in the next video, we are going to learn about the remaining part of the content of this chapter. Thank you. Have a nice day.